Hello, everybody, and welcome back for our 34th study in our Through the Bible series. We're trying to go through each chapter of the Bible in 5 minutes a day. Genesis chapter 34 today. This is definitely an interesting chapter. If you want the PDF with all the notes on it, it's free on our website. You can print it off, use it for whatever. Eventually, there's going to be a hard copy book with all these outlines in them. So watch out for that. If it's already available, there'll be a link down in the description. So Genesis chapter 34. Now, dating this chapter is a little bit difficult. It's tough to date it with precision, but it probably happened a short time after Jacob and his family returned from Haran and moved back down to Canaan. And we've been dating that to somewhere between 1745 BC and 1725 BC, a range of about 20 years. We've got several really interesting characters in this chapter. Of course, we have Jacob. He is the son of Isaac and Rebekah, and he's recently moved, as I just said, from Haran to Canaan. Then Dinah. Dinah was the daughter of Jacob with Leah. We read about her the first time in Genesis chapter 30. Then a guy named Hamor. Hamor, we mentioned briefly in the last chapter. He was the ruler of the city of Shechem, and he was from the family of the Hivites. Now, Hamor had a son whose name was Shechem, and he's described as the prince of the land. We then have Simeon. Simeon was one of Jacob's sons, his second oldest son, in fact, and he was the son of Jacob and Leah. And then another son of Jacob's, Levi. He was Jacob's third oldest son, and he was also the son of Jacob and Leah. As we consult our map, the events of Genesis chapter 34 happened in and around the area, the city of Shechem, which was in the land of Canaan. Now, one thing to keep in mind as we read this chapter, because it can be a little bit confusing, Shechem is the name of a city, and it is the name of a key character in this chapter, right? So if you're confused when we're going through this or reading the chapter for yourself, just keep that in mind. Shechem is the name of a city and of one of the characters we're going to talk about. Now let's go ahead and tackle our outline. This is a unique and very, very interesting chapter. You'll see why in a little bit. Section number 1, verses 1 through 4, Dinah, Jacob's daughter, is defiled. While Dinah, Jacob's daughter, was out visiting the women of the land, this guy named Shechem, the prince of the land, seized her and raped her. Shechem was obsessed with Dinah after this, and he asked his father Hamor to arrange the marriage between the two of them. So that's what Hamor tries to do in verses 5 through 18, but Jacob's sons trick him into making a pact with them. When Dinah's brothers, the sons of Jacob, found out what had happened to their sister, they were furious. But when Hamor and Shechem came to their house, they held their peace. Hamor proposed a treaty between his people in Shechem and Jacob's family. He said that they should make peace together. Jacob's sons could marry their women, and they can trade together, and it'll be great. And Hamor wanted Dinah for his son Shechem. And Shechem offered to pay any bride price in order to make Dinah his wife. Jacob's sons pretended like, this was a great idea, and they agreed with Hamor, but they did it only on one condition. They said that Hamor and all the people of his household and city needed to be circumcised before they would trade with them and intermarry with them. And Hamor and Shechem agreed to this stipulation. But it was indeed a trap, because in verses 19 through 31, we read about Levi and Simeon attacking Hamor's city. Hamor and Shechem returned to their city, and they convinced all the men there to be circumcised. That could not have been an easy conversation, but they were successful. And 3 days later, while all the men were still healing from their operation, Levi and Simeon, Jacob's sons, took swords, and they attacked Hamor and his city and all the men that were there, and they killed all of the men. And that included Hamor and Shechem. Then they took Dinah, their sister, and brought her back to Jacob's house. They plundered the city, they took all of their wives and their little children and their animals, and they returned to Jacob. And Jacob, when he found out what they had done, he was really concerned. He was concerned that the people of the land were going to hear about this. They were going to ally themselves against his household, and they were going to destroy them. We'll see that God prevents that from happening in the next chapter, but this is where chapter 34 leaves off. And that takes us to our application section. For this chapter, this is not so much an application as it is an observation that's important to keep in mind as you read the Bible. the Bible doesn't always speak specifically to the morality of the history that it records. If you read the story and you're like me, you are probably wanting to know what God thought about it. In God's eyes, were Levi and Simeon justified for what they did, for killing all the men of that city and killing Shechem and Hamor? Was their response extreme? What did God think of Shechem's actions? In Genesis chapter 34, God does not provide a definitive statement about what was right and what was wrong. And that's going to be something that we encounter quite a bit, especially in the Old Testament stories. In instances like this, it's important for us to focus on the information that we are given and to add this to the larger story that God is telling us throughout the book of Genesis in this case, but really the entire Bible.